Well. Oh, did not like that very much. Aye. Well, that was silly. Well, one moment I'm talking about Cynthia the doll, next thing you know, my entire desk, like including like the desk itself with the lights on it, went completely dark. The rest of the room was still fine, but something messed with the plug. So that's kind of funny. So then I went ahead, fixed that up, started going live as soon as I could. As I mentioned before, whenever I talk about these things, stuff does happen. It's true. That's just the kind of life I live sometime, and you know, I think after stream, probably gonna have to use some good old Palo Santo wood to cleanse my room. And I'm not even talking about the bad one first, about the doll that personally affected me the most. Unless it's Cynthia who follows. Peggy stays inside the room. Weird. Oh boy. Anywho's, hi everybody, I'm back. What shenanigans? My tabs are back. The vibes are here. How silly. Anyways, I was talking about Cynthia. Just like behind me, it's like, don't do it. Don't mess with my plugs. So yeah, channeled by a voodoo priestess, was kept inside a room for a while until one day, we put her at the basement stairs. Just to kind of look up at people, because back then people were not allowed to go inside the basement unless they had express permission from Zach, like if they were a VIP or something. Now, one day though, we decided to do something nice and fun for our boss, because, you know, he was cool, he treated us well. And so, we got him a murder mystery package, like one of those bundles that when you open it up, it has like a case there, newspaper clippings, links to articles and stuff. Like, it makes you do quote unquote detective work. And so when he found a nondescript package leaning against the gate of the museum, he of course took it inside as it was addressed to him, opened it up, and found a mystery inside. And throughout the day, he's going nuts checking this out, as he's like, oh man, this is wild. This thing that I found, this is a whole case. It was honestly kind of cute. But then we did have to come clean when he started talking about potentially bringing in. He's like, I had to talk to my producers. This is a whole thing. And we're like, no, Zach, it's a game. It's fake. We're sorry. And he got so pouty. He was like, oh man, I thought I was a detective. And what am I supposed to do about this other package? And we're like, hold on. Other package? So about like 5 of us go into the room with Zach. As he has another completely nondescript wrapped brown package, like it is paper wrapped. And we're like, Okay, no, we got you the box. What the hell is that? And we opened it up, even though it had no return address, no nothing. Inside was just a little tea set. And we were like, what, why? Why would somebody send us a nice looking little tea set? When one of the tour guides behind us, just suddenly sounding kind of weird, goes, "It's for Cynthia." We all look up and realize we're like, oh! So then we're like, well, if Cynthia wants it, I guess we should give it to her. So because she was already feeling kind of weird, we sent the person being affected down with the tea set. And the look on her face when she was going back up the stairs. She was having a state of euphoria. Like, wasn't really being herself at all, but it was a weird little moment. And Cynthia loved that little tea set for a while. Until she exploded the light bulb above her in the basement, and then we put her back inside of the dog closet in timeout. So that's always fun. And of course, we always got new dolls all the time. Like, we had this little doll that was brought in. We placed inside the first room, our room of oddities. This little baby doll with a nice white dress. And it had an interesting story behind it. But the weird thing was that after we put that doll inside, a lot of people suddenly started to mention seeing a little girl in white running down the hallway. You would start to feel, "Hi, Kate." You would start to feel something tugging on their sleeves, pulling on their hair as they were going down the halls. Pretty much would follow all the way through until the circus area. And it consistently sided ever since we put the doll in. Oh, that's interesting. Did I ever see it? No. Did I ever have my stuff tugged? I don't think so. Maybe. Maybe. It's been years. I don't remember. What are you doing, Kate? Welcome in. But of course, the big doll that always got top billing in our building. There you go. Was Peggy the doll, a demonically possessed doll from the UK. Now, if you do choose to look up Peggy, because there are plenty of pictures and videos of her online, I just urge you to be a bit careful, as even looking at a picture of her online has caused people to feel kinda sick, uncomfortable, heart palpitations, heart attacks, one documented case of death. So, just be careful if you decide to look inside of those baby blues. But we basically had Peggy at the Haunted Museum with a crucifix around her neck, sort of chilling inside of a little constructed dollhouse surrounded by a bunch of other little creepy dolls. It was a terrifying room, as we would bring people inside and tell them her history of the weird things she would cause. But a few months after we opened, we decided to put a spirit box inside of her room. And for those that don't know, a spirit box is basically a device that cycles through radio frequencies at a rapid rate. Our settings are specifically 150 or 200 stations per second backwards. So normally you're just supposed to hear like a lot of static and maybe a little jumbled note every now and then. However, it is said that spirits are able to communicate through the spirit box using that energy, and if you hear a voice, like very clearly saying a word, that's them communicating with you. And Peggy could definitely be talkative. Now, on some tours, she would be pretty quiet, not either vibing with the group or maybe the tour guide. With other tour guides, though, she would talk almost non-stop and was open to some questions. Her favorites to answer being, how old are you? What's your favorite color? It's blue, by the way. And any sort of other things as well that you might possibly think to ask. I did, though, on my tours, have to add on to the rules because the rules when you go to see Peggy are when you do go in to see her, you first say hello to Peggy. When you're in there, show respect, don't insult the doll, and when you leave, say goodbye to Peggy. Interesting song there, Allison. Later, though, on my tours, I would then have to ask people not to ask questions that they're not ready to hear the answer for. Keep the questions kinda simple. And that's because one day on a tour, well, I had rescued a group from the clown maze that we have upstairs. And while I was with them inside the Dybbuk box room, I noticed there was a girl there. And that girl was the kind of guest that every tour guide wants to have, hanging on your every word, excited to be there, and, just good energy overall. Everyone else is kind of a stick in the mud, but I thought to myself, this tour is gonna be for you. But after we go and see the Dybbuk box, it is time to go and see Peggy. And as I'm explaining the rules to go and see her, well, the girl kind of interrupted and asked, hey, is the spirit box in there? And I'm like, oh yeah, so you know. Yeah, it's still in there, it's working right now. In fact, you could kind of hear her talking right now, because she always talks when I'm around. So I bring them in, and I give them the floor to go ahead and ask Peggy any questions that they might want to hear. The girl immediately asks a question asking, hey Peggy, what's my little brother's name? And immediately from the spirit box, we heard a name. Looking at the girl, she was confused. Like, she kind of recognized it as she went, that's not quite it. And then a few seconds later, Peggy said another name. And that's when the color completely drained from her face. She started to shake as tears welled up in her eyes. She shook her head as she went, no, no. And then burst out of the room, sobbing. And being that I'm on tour right now, I go, nope, can't have that on my tour, as I chase after her. And I find her sitting in the dark corner between Peggy and the Dybbuk box, just inconsolable. And I decide to ask her, hey, what was that about? Hey, Luxie, long time no see. And it turns out that a few weeks to a month before coming to the museum, her little brother and his best friend that had all grown up together, it turns out they had actually passed away in a car accident. And just the implication of hearing someone dear to you named from the voice of a demon, well, it was a little bit too much for her to bear. Sure enough, the implication of that is staggering, terrifying even. So, I ask people to keep it simple, because sure, it is funny when you ask, hey Peggy, what's the name of somebody in this room? You hear a name and somebody goes, oh shit. And everyone else just laughs because that's great. But you do have to be careful what you decide to ask. You also have to be careful when you find out that they like you. And unfortunately for me, I found out that she liked me. It was the final tour of the night. Get closer. The final tour of the night, and I was currently at Section A as we were about to close. Section A being the very first part of the building, where you take the group inside, give them the history, go through the first 4 rooms, and then pass them off and go home first. And I was very much looking forward to going home first. Almost never got to do that. And the final group turns out to have been a lucky couple who managed to get in before the gates closed. Literally just a man and a woman celebrating the woman's birthday. So we start our tour, and honestly, they were fantastic guests. They were again hanging on my every word, super excited to be there. And they were, of course, very, very brave when it came to staring inside the haunted Mirabelle Lugosi. But it was my time to say goodbye to them. And so I got on my radio and asked, hey, is the next tour guide ready for the group? And suddenly over the radio, I get a message from the manager who told me, hey, can you actually go ahead and take this group throughout the rest of the building so everyone else can go home for the night? Thanks. Well, there goes the early night. Turns out I'm getting home after midnight. But again, they were a fun group. It was her birthday, so here we go. Enjoying the rest of the tour at about 1.5 times speed because I have places to be. Go through the building, they're excited through the tour. We go upstairs, I rescue them from the clown maze. They of course are brave enough to go and see the Dybbuk box. And then it's time to go and see Peggy. Now, I told them the history, that she's from the UK, known to cause people to feel very sick, and the rules of when you go inside, say hello, be polite, and say goodbye when you leave. And so, we go on in, and I give them the floor after I tell them about that spirit box. And the woman then asked, hey Peggy, how old are you? To which you heard a number over the spirit box saying 8. Which is a lie. She's been in that doll for over 50 years. But sometimes, when you actually get a response on the spirit box, sometimes a whole group will just freeze up completely. Like, you will get stunned silence for a good minute if you let it. So I waited about 40 seconds before I decided to cut in and be like, hey Peggy, what's your favorite color? Blue. Cool, me too. You have anything else you want to tell this group right now? No? Okay, well then, let's go ahead and wrap up saying goodbye to Peggy. Let's have it. And then the woman interrupted me as she asked, Peggy, do you like the tour guide in the room right now? Immediate response was a deep, dark yes. Oh, I had such a pit in my stomach. My knees buckled. I wanted to fall to the ground so badly when I heard that. But I'm a professional. I'm on tour. So I go, hey, thanks, Peggy. I like you too. But we gotta go now, so say goodbye to Peggy, everybody. Goodbye, Peggy. We leave the room, and I close the door behind me. And I sink to my knees and I ask them, why? Why would you throw me under the bus like that? Because think about it, what does that mean? When a demon says they like you, am I good? Am I damned? Please tell me what that means. And then what does it mean when they say they hate you? It's like, there were a few tour guides Peggy definitely hated and let them know. So like, oh, the trauma. We were so callous too to each other. Anytime a tour guide would come in, they would sit down, like face in their palms, being like, oh, guys, Peggy said she liked me. And we're like, ha ha, she likes you. But then when it happens to you, you're like, and you know the worst part is, multiple people confirmed that she liked me. Like, I would be outside taking care of guests and whatnot, when I would get a call over the radio being like, hey, Cass, we just had a tour ask Peggy if she liked you, and we got a yes. And I'm like, why would you tell me that? I'm busy. Get off the net. Very, very offended by that. A lot of things tend to like me at the museum, honestly. I don't know if I just had good vibes or something, or they wanted my soul. Who could say? All I know is that I definitely did get followed home a few times. And anytime I would come back on off-duty hours, the building would respond very gently, actually. To me, not to anyone else in the group. Now, haunted dolls aside, we of course had various other objects around the building, such as the Dybbuk box. Oh boy, me and my homies hated being with the Dybbuk box. Now, the Dybbuk box itself that we had at the museum specifically was apparently owned by a Jewish Holocaust survivor by the name of Havila, who had escaped the concentration camps, and after making it to the Americas, found she was followed by a Dybbuk, or a Jewish possessing spirit. She then sealed said Dybbuk inside of a little wine cabinet and wanted to be buried with it, but turns out she was not allowed to, and so the daughter had the box and sold it in a garage sale to a man who did not believe in anything spiritual whatsoever. He's like, that's a load of bunk, but it's a nice little cabinet. I'm gonna give it to my mom for a birthday present. But as he had the box, weird things would begin to happen. As lights would begin to break, he would smell cat urine in the home despite not owning a cat. Strange knockings would happen, and his dreams would be plagued with nightmares of an old hag just beating him, and then he would wake up covered in bruises. But, you know, weird things happening, but whatever. Gave the box to his mother as a gift, who then opened it up and immediately fell into a small paralytic coma. When she came to, she was only able to write down 2 words: hate, gift. Which is honestly kind of funny. But with that, the man decided to sell the box, this time on eBay, with the description saying, no guys, listen, this is actually for real. So it was bought, of course, by another skeptic. But he began to experience the exact same things as the first man, except this time he found his roommate dead on top of the box. So he decided to bury it, on orders by a rabbi who said, build it an ark. I think it was a sort type of walnut wood. I don't remember. And bury it at least like 15 feet in the ground, and the man did so. Unfortunately, money talks, because turns out the director of the movie The Possession wanted to actually use the box as a prop. So, the box was dug up, and every single actor on set was like, wait, that's the real thing? They look at their scripts. We don't want to go anywhere near that. So sure enough, they made a replica and used that for filming. And unfortunately, the box was uncovered. So, Zach bought it, and we sealed it inside of a little glass case, inside of its own room, surrounded by a row of salt and sage. However, when you look closely at the box, we would always notice that the salt around it was always kind of burning away at the edges, and the sage itself was molding. If you know anything about sage, sage doesn't mold. Like, physically impossible for it to mold. So the fact that it's molding speaks to the level of power inside of that box. Now, people of course experienced a lot of things in there. I know some tour guides saw shadowy figures in there darting around the room. I myself felt myself getting kind of punched in the side of the gut there, and then almost vomiting afterwards, and several guests did vomit afterwards on that same exact spot. So much so we installed vomit bags there. We're like, listen, we get it. Hey, Jam, it sure is. We get it. We know what happens there, but it's a problem for the carpet. Very pragmatic at the Haunted Museum. But I think one of the worst things that happened with the Dybbuk box, minus the Post Malone thing, that was a wild day, was probably what happened to our fellow tour guide, Virginia. Now, Virginia herself, such a sweetheart. We loved her, this cool old punk rock lady we happened to poach from the Titanic Museum. Listen, we had better hours, weekly pay. Yeah. It was nice. And she, of course, so very, very sweet. But one day, she was assigned, on a Sunday actually, she was assigned to Section E, which is the upstairs. Probably the worst spot for every single tour guide. Because upstairs is where we have all the bad stuff. And starting off the day there is always pretty rough. But among the first few tours she had up there, she had something weird happen. As she brought the group inside to go and see the box, everyone surrounded it, as is the norm. We tend to circle the box as we talk about it, and Virginia herself leaned in close, leaned in forward, shining her flashlight inside to show everyone the salt and the sage as she told everyone the history of the box. When suddenly, her face was violently slammed against the case with so much force that all of her makeup caked against the side of the glass. And when she got up, she was furious and fuming, like she was going to kill somebody. She was going to murder whoever had pushed her into the case. There was no one behind her. Everyone else around the room looked at her scared because they watched this cool lady literally get pushed. Like she had her balance. She was perfectly fine. Then suddenly, wham! Right into the case. And for the rest of the time she was up there, with her groups, they would constantly hear dark growling around the corners. And just everyone began to feel kind of sick and scared. And Eventually got to a point Virginia said, I can't be up here. Not for the rest of today. Someone else cover for me, please. Sure enough, we switched her out with somebody else. Things kind of calmed down. That was still a wild day. Zach. Well, of course, we showed him the footage because the security cameras caught it all. It's like, whoa, cool. Can we keep the makeup on the case? And we're like, no. Be nice to Virginia. The heck, man. It's just the kind of stuff that would happen. Like, you know, makes for great stories. Oh, man. That was probably one of the worst days she had there at the museum. I wonder how it compares to my worst day at the museum. Buckle in, everyone. It's gonna be a time. Now, I did a lot of things at the Haunted Museum. I was, of course, first trained as a tour guide. For a while, a long time, I was the line host. Basically, I would get everyone signed up with their waivers, get the groups ready, and, you know, basically accommodate everyone to begin their journey into the museum. I worked inside the box office, where I sold everyone their tickets and answered the phone, and nobody believed that I was a real person until I talked a little more. And occasionally checked the emails too. And I would give exclusive Spanish tours, being the only Spanish speaker there. But the other big thing was being a kind of weird indoor security / part of the tour. My job would basically be to stay at the front of the building. Thank you for the licking, Jam. Stay at the front of the building, watch the tours, and basically launch the next ones. And the best part was, I would get to sit. I was given a cool skull throne by Zach to just enjoy as I would watch these groups go through their tours and then launch the next one. That's fair, Jam. Now, while doing this, my fellow tour guides would look at me and we would kind of talk a little bit, you know, a little bit of banter. And more, the tour guides would keep looking at this little dummy that was in the next room, in the first room of oddities, just sitting in a little chair. They would look at him, they would look at me and go, wow, you look like that dummy over there. And I'm like, why would you say that? That's so mean. How could you? But then, we had an idea. I soon began to start dressing up as the dummy. You know, might as well play into it. And sure enough, Zach saw, he noted, and he loved it. And he started giving advice to me. He's like, oh, stay completely still like a mannequin. Make sure, like, they can't tell that you're real. And I'm like, well, I was already kind of doing that, but sure, yeah, we'll do that. It was, of course, very effective, sitting side by side with the dummy. And honestly, people had a hard time telling if I was real or not. YouTube died for us. Oh, well, we're dropping frames. Internet's dying. Oh no. Hi. Did you know that when I talk about these stories, things happen? Probably gonna have a nightly visitor tonight before I tell them off. On internet, you're in a different room, you'll be okay. You good? Yeah, I started watching. Just my internet died for a little bit there. Oh, how silly. Let me finish the story and then we can move on to creepypastas. Yeah, seems okay now. And YouTube agrees. Okay. So, I would, of course, use the dummy, and it was very effective, very silly, very fun. And even sometimes I would pick up the chairs while people weren't looking, and I would kind of use them to block off the ways. You know, be kind of creepy and silly about it. Tend to still be a dummy. One day, though, it was a very empty day. We had no idea why, but for some reason, people just weren't coming to the museum. Like normally, we would have like 150, 200, even 300 people showing up a day. For some reason, we barely broke past like 70 that day. We were taking in such small groups. Like, I think 6 was the most people we had. One person literally waited like an hour and a half inside the lobby and got his own private tour. Because we're like, we can't keep him that long. And no one else is here, so launch it, I guess. During all this time waiting in between tours with nobody coming on by, the house began to grow restless. Its main source of energy, the guests, there wasn't really enough. And so, unfortunately, it kind of began to look at us tour guides and workers inside of the building. And unfortunately for me, being that I was at the front of the building, I was in fact alone. Waiting in between tours, there was a good gap of about 2 hours of me pacing around, waiting, making sure the door didn't open by itself. That's not a haunted thing, by the way, it's just an old house. And, you know, kind of talking to the people in rooms adjacent to me. Just, you know, passing time, phone out. But as I'm there pacing around, suddenly, I look at the dummy on the little chair. Or more specifically, I looked at the little chair. I realized something about it, and I have absolutely no idea how the thought came into my brain, but I suddenly had a thought of, wait a second, isn't that chair the chair that I've been manhandling for like a month now? Chair that I've been in constant contact with for a while. Chair the dummy is sitting on. Isn't that chair the exact same chair that Annabelle the doll, the legendary Annabelle, sat on when she came to visit the museum? As soon as I had that thought, my right forearm was gripped in pain. I had a burning red mark going down the entirety of my forearm. And I gripped it. I was in pain. I called out for help, and sure enough, the 2 little people around me, they saw it. They're like, oh man, check your heart. Here, I'll get Mike. And I checked it, and no, it wasn't a heart attack. That'd be the left arm if that was happening. But I was just in so much pain, and nobody knew what was going on. And unfortunately, while they were checking that out, it was time to launch another tour. So they're like, "All right, just hang on, buddy. You just keep on trucking." And I'm like, "Okay." Hurts though. So the tour arrives. They are enjoying their experience. And they leave, leaving me once again all alone. And I pace around, my arm is still burning. And this time I look at my chair as I see a transparent orb begin to float out of the ground and slowly make its way into the room of oddities. It slowly floated into that first room. And then, once it made it to the middle, went into the ceiling. As soon as it did, there was no more burning, no more redness, no more pain. All that was left were 3 scratches going down my arm. So I show that to everybody and they say, "Wow, they got you good." But for the rest of the day, I was just completely drained. I felt like absolute garbage. And it was so bad that Mike sent me home. He goes, "We're going to launch the last tour right now. We kind of had to turn the building off. So just go home, buddy. Rest up. You're done. Good luck. Feel better. See you tomorrow." And I'm like, "All right, I'll take it." So I start to make my way down the hallway, and I make it into the break room. I start to take off my trench coat, but I realize, uh-oh, I still have a remote for that first room inside my pocket. And if I take that thing home with me, I'm gonna lose my job. And if I leave it here and somebody breaks the remote, I'm also going to lose my job. So I guess the best thing to do, since a tour just launched and I'm not feeling good, I'll just sit and wait. Apparently, I had waited too long, as either that tour guide was going extremely fast or I lost track of time. Because by the time I had gone out, Mike had already turned all the lights off for the front part of the building. And so, it was only me and my dinky company flashlight that did absolutely nothing. I think to myself, I got a job to do, I gotta do it. As I step into the darkness. With each step I took through the dark hallway, I could tell it did not want me there, as each step got worse and worse. It's just the feeling of darkness just wanted me out of there, until I made it to that very first room. It was an abyss staring back at me. I took 3 big steps, put the remote on the glass case. As I start to back up and I say, "That's it. That's all I'm doing. That's all I want. I'm leaving. Goodbye." As soon as I turned around to leave, suddenly a female voice whispered directly into my ear, "Hessia." At that point, I was gone. I was done. Tours be damned, I'm out of there as I'm sprinting down the hall. I only stopped in front of the break room because I saw a fellow tour guide there, as I just go, "Did you say my name?" I'm like, "What? No, I just got here. We ended the tour." I said, "Screw this. I'm getting a cleansing." That was probably the worst day I ever had at the museum, and I still came back to work the next day, but damn, that sucked. I definitely found out having my name whispered directly into my ear is my absolute least favorite thing that a spirit can do. Like, it will always set me off, and it wasn't the only time it happened, but it was definitely the worst. What a time. Well, I hope you enjoyed some of those spooky stories there. But I think I'm going to take this time to read some creepypastas. And hopefully that will calm down whatever I may have brought into my room. Please don't unplug my computer again. So according to the top ranked creepypasta stories, there's Drumming in the Clouds, Psychosis, He Who Wanders, I Found a Letter from My Stalker, The Seer of Possibilities, The Clock Strikes Twice, The Living History Project, Shattered Life, Sadie, Bedtime. Let's read that. Ooh, it's from 2012. You guys remember 2012? I remember 2012. Tags are beings and entities, children and childhood, famous creepypasta, monsters, creatures, and cryptids, strange and unexplained, bedtime stories, beings, childhood, children, creatures, entities, kids, Michael Whitehouse, and monsters. Yeah, that could be fun. Let's do it, I suppose. Part 1. The beginning. Bedtime is supposed to be a happy event for a tired child. For me, it was terrifying. While some children might complain about being put to bed before they have finished watching a film or playing their favorite video game, when I was a child, nighttime was something to truly fear. Somewhere in the back of my mind, it still is. As someone who is trained in the sciences, I cannot prove that what happened to me was objectively real. I can swear that what I experienced was genuine horror, a fear which in my life, I'm glad to say, has never been equaled. I will relate it to you all now as best I can, make of it what you will, but I'll be glad to just get it off my chest. I can't remember exactly when it started, but my apprehension towards falling asleep seemed to correspond with my being moved into a room of my own. I was 8 years old at the time, and until then, I had shared a room quite happily with my older brother. As is perfectly understandable for a boy 5 years my senior, my brother eventually wished for a room of his own, and as a result, I was given the room at the back of the house. It was a small, narrow, yet oddly elongated room, large enough for a bed and a couple of chests of drawers, but not much else. Couldn't really complain because, even at that age, I understood that we did not have a large house, and I had no real cause to be disappointed, as my family was both loving and caring. It was a happy childhood. During the day, a solitary window looked out into our back garden. Nothing out of the ordinary, but even during the day, the light which crept into the room seemed almost hesitant. As my brother was given a new bed, I was given the bunk air beds that we used to share. While I was upset about sleeping on my own, I was excited at the thought of being able to sleep in the top bunk, which seemed far more adventurous to me. Also, side note, I did the same thing. I was excited about the top bunk, but heck, I didn't like sleeping alone. The very first night, I remember a strange feeling of unease creeping slowly from the back of my mind. I lay on the top bunk, staring down at my action figures and cars strewn across the green-blue carpet. As imaginary battles and adventures took place between the toys on the floor, I couldn't help but feel that my eyes were being slowly drawn towards the bottom bunk, as if something was moving in the corner of my eye, something which did not wish to be seen. The bunk was empty, impeccably made with a dark blue blanket tucked in neatly, partially covering two rather bland white pillows. I didn't think anything of it at the time. I was a child. The noise slipping under my door from my parents' television bathed me in a warm sense of safety and well-being. I fell asleep. When you awaken from a deep sleep to something moving or stirring, it can take a few moments for you to truly understand what is happening. The fog of sleep hangs over your eyes and ears, even when lucid. Something was moving. There was no doubt about that. At first, I wasn't sure what it was. Everything was dark, almost pitch black. But was enough light creeping in from outside to outline that narrowly suffocating room. Two thoughts appeared in my mind almost simultaneously. The first was that my parents were in bed because the rest of the house lay both in darkness and silence. Hi, Maggie. The second thought turned to the noise, a noise which had obviously awoken me. As the last cobwebs of sleep withered from my mind, the noise took on a more familiar form. Sometimes the simplest of sounds can be the most unnerving. Cold wind whistling through a tree outside, a neighbor's footsteps uncomfortably close, or, in this case, the simple sound of bed sheets rustling in the dark. That was it. Bed sheets rustling in the dark, as if some disturbed sleeper was attempting to get all too comfortable in the bottom bunk. I lay there in disbelief, thinking that the noise was either my imagination or perhaps just my pet cat finding somewhere comfortable to spend the night. It was then that I noticed my door, shut as it had been as I'd fallen asleep. Perhaps my mom had checked in on me and the cat had sneaked into my room then. Yes, must have been it. I turned to face the wall, closing my eyes in the vain hope that I could fall back asleep. As I moved, the rustling noise from underneath me ceased. I thought that I must have disturbed my cat. Quickly, I realized that the visitor in the bottom bunk was much less mundane than my pet trying to sleep, and much more sinister. As if alerted to and disgruntled by my presence, the disturbed sleeper began to toss and turn violently, like a child having a tantrum in their bed. In the attic, and it's your closet. You have another closet and they both make weird noises. That's awful, Maggie. Hate that. I'm reading a creepypasta. I could hear the sheets twist and turn with increasing ferocity. Fear then gripped me, not like the subtle sense of unease that I had experienced earlier, but now potent and terrifying. My heart raced as my eyes panicked, scanning the almost impenetrable darkness. I let out a cry. As most young boys do, I instinctively shouted on my mother. I could hear something stir on the other side of the house, but as I began to breathe a sigh of relief, my parents were coming to save me. The bunk bed started to shake violently, as if gripped by an earthquake, scraping against the wall. I hear the sheets below me thrashing around as if tormented by malice. I did not want to jump down to safety as I feared the thing in the bottom bunk would reach out and grab me, pulling me into the darkness. So I stayed there, white knuckles clenching my own blankets like a shroud of protection. The wait seemed like an eternity. The door finally, and thankfully, burst open, and I lay bathed in light while the bottom bunk, the resting place of my unwanted visitor, lay empty and peaceful. I cried, and my mother consoled me. Tears of fear followed by relief streamed down my face. Yet, through all the horror and relief, I did not tell her why I was so upset. I cannot explain it, but it was as though whatever had been in the bunk would return if I even so much as spoke of it, or uttered a single syllable of its existence. Whether that was the truth, I do not know. As a child, I felt as if that unseen menace remained close, listening. My mother lay in the empty bunk, promising to stay there until morning. Eventually, my anxiety diminished. Tiredness pushed me back towards sleep. I remained restless, waking several times momentarily to the sound of rustling bedsheets. I remember the next day, wanting to go anywhere, be anywhere, but in that narrow, suffocating room. It was a Saturday and I played outside, quite happily with my friends. Though our house was not large, we were lucky to have a long, sloping garden in the back. I played there often, as much of it was overgrown, and we could hide in the bushes, climb in the huge sycamore tree, which towered above all else, and easily imagine ourselves in the throes of a grand adventure in some untamed exotic land. As fun as it all was, occasionally my eye would turn to that small window, ordinary, slight, and innocuous. For me, that thin boundary was a looking glass into a strange, cold pocket of dread. Outside, the lush green surroundings of our garden, filled with the smiling faces of my friends, could not extinguish the creeping feeling clawing its way up my spine, each hair standing on end. The feeling of something in that room, watching me play, waiting for the night when I would be alone, eagerly filled with hate. It may sound strange to you, but by the time my parents ushered me back into that room for the night, I said nothing. I didn't protest. I didn't even make an excuse as to why I couldn't sleep there. Simply and suddenly walked into that room, climbed the few steps into the top bunk, and then waited. As an adult, I would be telling everyone about my experience, but even at that age, I felt almost silly to be talking about something which I really had no evidence for. I'd be lying, however. I said this was my primary reason. I still felt that this thing would be enraged if I so much as spoke of it. It's funny how certain words can remain hidden from your mind, no matter how blatant or obvious they are. One word came to me that second night, lying there in the darkness alone, frightened, aware of a rotten change in the atmosphere. thickening of the air as if something had displaced it. As I heard the first casual twists of the bedsheet below, the first anxious increase of my heartbeat at the realization that something was once again in the bottom bunk, that word, a word which had been sent into exile, filtered up through my consciousness, breaking free of all repression, gasping for air, screaming, etching, and carving itself into my mind. Ghost. As this thought came to me, I noticed that my unwelcome visitor had ceased moving. Bedsheets lay calm and dormant, but they had been replaced by something far more hideous. Slow, rhythmic, rasping breath heaved and escaped from the thing below. Imagine its chest rising and falling with each sordid, wheezing, and garbled breath. I shuddered, and I hoped beyond all hope that it would leave without occurrence. The house lay, as it had the previous night, in a thick blanket of darkness. Silence prevailed, all but for my perverted breath of my as yet unseen bunkmate. I lay there, terrified. I just wanted this thing to go, to leave me alone. What did it want? Then, something unmistakably chilling transpired. It moved. It moved in a way different from before. When it threw itself into the bottom bunk, it seemed unrestrained, without purpose, almost animalistic. Why, hello, Randy. This movement, however, was driven by awareness, with purpose, with a goal in mind. For that thing lying there in the darkness, that thing which seemed intent on terrorizing a young boy, calmly and nonchalantly sat up. Its labored breathing had become louder, as now only a mattress and a few flimsy wooden slats separated my body from the unearthly breath below. I lay there, my eyes filled with tears, a fear which mere words cannot relate to you or anyone else coursed through my veins. And thank you, Randora. I will. I would not have believed that this fear could have heightened. I was so wrong. I imagined this thing would look like, sitting there, listening from below my mattress, hoping to catch the slightest hint that I was awake. Imagination then turned to an unnerving reality. It began to touch the wooden slats which my mattress sat on. It seemed to caress them carefully, running what I imagined to be fingers and hands across the surface of the wood. And, with great force, it prodded angrily between two slats in the mattress. Even through the padding, it felt as though someone had viciously stuck their fingers into my side. I let out an almighty cry, and the wheezing, shaking, and moving thing in the bunk below replied in kind by violently vibrating the bunk as it had the night before. Small flakes of paint powdered onto my blanket from the wall as the frame of the bed scraped along it backwards and forwards. Once again, I was bathed in light, and there stood my mother, loving, caring as she always was, with a comforting hug and calming words which eventually subdued my hysteria. Of course, she asked what was wrong, but I could not say. I dared not say. I simply said one word over and over and over again. Nightmare. This pattern of events continued for weeks, if not months. Night after night, I would awaken to the sound of rustling sheets. Each time I would scream so as to not provide this abomination with time to prod and feel for me. Each cry, the bed would shake violently, stopping with the arrival of my mother, who would spend the rest of the night in the bottom bunk, seemingly unaware of the sinister force torturing her son nightly. Along the way, I managed to feign illness a few times and come up with other, less than truthful reasons for sleeping in my parents' bed. More often than not, I would be alone for the first few hours of each night in that place. The room, where the light from outside did not sit right. Alone with that thing. With time, I could become desensitized to almost anything, no matter how horrific. I had come to realize that, for whatever reason, this thing could not harm me when my mother was present. I'm sure the same would have been said for my father, but as loving as he was, waking him from sleep was almost impossible. After a few months, I had grown accustomed to my nightly visitor. Do not mistake this for some unearthly friendship. I detested the thing. I still feared it greatly, as I could almost sense its desires and its personality, if you could call it that. One filled with a perverted and twisted hatred, yet longing for me, of perhaps all things. My greatest fears were realized in the winter. The days grew short. The longer nights merely provided this wretch with more opportunities. It was a difficult time for my family. My grandmother, a wonderfully kind and gentle woman, had deteriorated greatly since the death of my grandfather. My mother was trying her best to keep her in the community as long as possible. However, dementia is a cruel and degenerative illness, robbing a person of their memories one day at a time. Soon, she recognized none of us, and it became clear that she would need to be moved from her house to a nursing home. Or if she could be moved. My grandmother had a particularly difficult few nights, and my mother decided that she would stay with her. As much as I loved my grandmother and felt nothing but anguish at her illness, to this day, I feel guilty that my first thoughts were not of her, but of what my nightly visitor may do should it become aware of my mother's absence. Her presence being the one thing which I was sure was protecting me from the full horror of this thing's reach. I rushed home from school that day and immediately wrenched the bed sheets and mattress from the lower bunk, removing all the slats and placing an old desk, a chest of drawers, and some chairs which we kept in the cupboard where the bottom bunk used to be. I told my father I was making an office, which he found adorable, but I'd be damned if I'd give that thing a place to sleep for one more night. As darkness approached, I lay there knowing my mother was not in the house. Did not know what to do. My only impulse was to sneak into her jewelry box and take a small family crucifix which I had seen there before. While my family was not very religious, at that age, I still believed in God and hoped that somehow this would protect me. Although fearful and anxious, while gripping the crucifix under my pillow tightly in one hand, sleep eventually came, and as I drifted off to dream, I hoped that I would awaken in the morning without incidents. Fortunately, that night was the most terrifying of all. I woke gradually. The room was once again dark. As my eyes adjusted, I could gradually make out the window and the door, the walls, some toys on the shelf, and even to this day, I shudder to think of it, for there was no noise, no rustling of sheets, no movement at all. The room felt lifeless, yet not empty. The nightly visitor, that unwelcome, wheezing, hate-filled thing which had terrorized me night after night, was not in the bottom bunk. It was in my bed. I opened my mouth to scream, but nothing came out. Utter terror had shaken from the very sound of my voice. I lay motionless. I could not scream. I did not want to let it know I was awake. I had not yet seen it. I could only feel it. It was obscured under my blanket. I could see its outline. I could feel its presence, but I dared not look. The weight of it pressed down on top of me, a sensation I will never forget. When I say that hours passed, I do not exaggerate. Lying there motionless in the darkness, I was every bit a scared and frightened young boy. If it had been during the summer months, it would have been light by then. The grasp of winter is long and unrelenting, and I knew it would be hours before sunrise, a sunrise which I yearned for. I was a timid child by nature, but I reached a breaking point, a moment where I could wait no longer, where I could survive under this intimately deviant abomination no longer. Fear can sometimes wear you out, make you threadbare, a shell of nerves leaving only the slightest trace of you behind. I had to get out of that bed. And I remembered the crucifix. My hand still lay underneath the pillow, but it was empty. I slowly moved my wrist around to find it, minimizing as best I could the sound and vibrations caused, but it could not be found. I had either knocked it off the top bunk or it had, I could not even bear to think of it, been taken from my hand. Without the crucifix, I had lost any sense of hope. Even at such a young age, you can be acutely aware of what death is and how intensely frightened of it. I knew I was going to die in that bed if I lay there, dormant, passive, doing nothing. I had to leave that room behind, but how? Should I leap from the bed and hope that I make it to the door? If it's faster than me, should I slowly slip out and off that top bunk, hoping not to disturb my uncanny bedfellow? Realizing that it had not stirred when I moved, trying to find the crucifix, and to have the strangest of thoughts. What if it was asleep? It hadn't so much as breathed since I had woken up. Perhaps it was resting, believing that it had finally got me, that I was finally in its grasp. Or perhaps it was toying with me. After all, it had been doing just that for countless nights, and now with me under it, pinned against my mattress with no mother to protect me, maybe it was holding off, savoring its victory until the last possible moment, like a wild animal savoring its prey. I tried to breathe as shallowly as possible, and mustering every ounce of courage I could, I reached over slowly my right hand and began to peel the blanket off of me. What I found under those covers almost stopped my heart. I did not see it. As my hand moved the blanket, brushed against something smooth and cold, something which felt unmistakably like a gaunt hand. I held my breath in terror, as I was sure it must now have known that I was awake. Nothing. It did not stir. It felt red. After a few moments, I placed my hand carefully further down the blanket, felt a thin, poorly formed forearm. My confidence and almost twisted sense of curiosity grew as I moved down further to a disproportionately larger bicep muscle. The arm was outstretched, lying across my chest, and the hand resting on my left shoulder, as if it had grabbed me in my sleep. I realized that I would have to move this cadaverous appendage if I even so much as hoped to escape its grasp. For some reason, the feeling of torn, ragged clothing on the shoulder of this nighttime invader stopped me in my tracks. Fear once again swelled in my stomach and in my chest as I recoiled my hand in disgust at the touch of straggled, oily hair. I could not bring myself to touch its face, although I wonder to this very day what it felt like. Dear God, it moved. Moved. It was subtle, but its grip on my shoulder and across my body strengthened. No tears came, but God, how I wanted to cry. As its hand and arm slowly coiled around me, my right leg brushed along the cool wall which the bed lay against. All that happened to me in that room, this was the strangest. I realized that this clutching, rancid thing, which drew great delight from violating a young boy's bed, was not entirely on top of me. Sticking out from the wall, like a spider striking from its lair. Suddenly, its grip moved from a slow tightening to a sudden squeeze. It pulled and clawed at my clothes as if frightened that the opportunity would soon pass. I fought against it, but its emaciated arm was too strong for me. Its head rose up writhing, contorting under the blanket. I now realized where it was taking me, into the wall. I fought for my dear life. I cried, and suddenly my voice returned to me, yelling and screaming. But no one came. Then I realized why it was so eager to suddenly strike, why this thing had to have me now. My window, that window which seemed to represent so much malice from outside, streaked hope, the first rays of sunshine. I struggled further, knowing that if I could just hold on, it would soon be gone. As I fought for my life, the unearthly parasite shifted, slowly pulling itself up my chest, its head now poking out from under the blankets, wheezing, coughing, and rasping. I do not remember its features. I simply remember its breath against my face, foul, as cold as ice. As the sun broke over the horizon, that dark place, that suffocating room of contempt was washed, bathed in sunlight. Passed out as its scrawny fingers encircled my neck, squeezing the very life from me. I awoke to my father offering to make me some breakfast, a wonderful sight indeed. I had survived the most horrible experience of my life until then, and now we moved the bed away from the wall, leaving behind the furniture I had believed would stop that thing from taking a bed. Little did I think that it would try to take mine and me. Weeks passed without incidents, yet on one cold, frostbitten night, I awoke to the sound of the furniture where the bunk beds used to be, vibrating violently. In a moment it passed. I lay there sure I could hear a distant wheezing coming from deep within the wall, finally fading into the distance. I've never told anyone this story before. To this day, I still break out into cold sweat at the sound of bed sheets rustling in the night, or a wheeze brought on by a common cold. I certainly never sleep with my bed against a wall. Call it superstition, if you will, but as I said, I cannot discount conventional explanations such as sleep paralysis, hallucination, or that of an overactive imagination. What I can say is this. The following year, I was given a larger room on the other side of the house, and my parents took that strangely suffocating, elongated place as their bedroom. They said they didn't need a large room, just one big enough for the bed and a few things. They lasted 10 days. We moved on the 11th. That's the end of part 1. Make this thing long. I think, though, we'll pick this back up another time. It was very interesting, though, and I hope you all enjoyed how I was reading it. For now, though, I think I'm going to go ahead and end it for tonight. So everyone, rest easy, take care. I will catch you all Tuesday. Bye everybody.